your screen. Okay. All right, I see the first slide. Excellent. Okay. Everybody who's currently in the room will be starting this presentation in just 1 minute. We do appreciate your patience. All right, we are at that half-hour mark. I'm going to go ahead and put some information in the chat box for the 16 attendees who are currently in the room. Okay, let's get started. Well, welcome and thank you for attending today's webinar. It's being sponsored by the Texas Society of Association Executives and technically supported by SeminarWeb. You can click the Q&A button to ask questions during this presentation or to submit any technical issues that you might be facing as well. Our presenter today and myself will be answering those questions at our discretion. As you can see, the chat box is also available. I just submitted some information in there. You can use that chat box to also submit questions if you prefer to submit questions there or to make comments as well. I would like everybody to just say hello in that chat box. Before you do, I want you to change that blue bar there that says whatever it might say on your computer. I want you to change that to everyone and just submit a quick hello. Just say hello in the chat box. Tell us where you're from. And the last thing I'd like to mention, of course, is the title of today's presentation. As you can see, it's titled Unlocking Potential Through Organizational Design. And it's being presented by Eric Curtis. So at this point, I will turn that presentation over to Eric.
All right, thank you, Joseph. I appreciate everyone taking some time in their day to learn a little bit about organization design. This is one of my absolute favorite types of consulting projects to work with clients on. So I'm excited to share some of the things that we've learned. I'm pretty much going to structure this in 3 parts. Going to provide a little background as to what organization design is, talk a little bit about our experience with it, and then give you a concrete tool that we use as part of our process and client engagements that you can use with your team and your staff, and then open it up afterwards to questions, as I'm excited to hear what you might have for challenges, obstacles, or things that you might be dealing with that you want to discuss on the Zoom today. So I thought I'd start out with a little bit of observation as to what we're seeing from an association ecosystem standpoint. So as technology is advancing, and we all know that that's happening at a pretty significant pace of change, it's also enabling organizations to operate at scale far more effectively. So that's providing a lot of opportunities for organizations when they go into the strategic planning room to think a little bit differently about their service. And it's also helping to evolve and adapt business models as we've seen with COVID, the adoption, the acceptance of the virtual environment has become more well suited to everybody. and more readily adopted by everybody. And so that's led to kind of this push into the digital landscape. And as we move into the digital landscape, geographies, whether those are regional, state, or even country geographies, start to go away. And that can impact the strategy, but also the type of competition that you are up against as an association, is that you're going to be hitting competition from multiple fronts. So whether that's your peers in other regions, other locations, whether that is tangential associations or for-profit organizations that are delivering education as a whole, et cetera. So part of the way we're seeing a lot of associations tackle this scale, this technology advancement, is through merger and affiliation growth. And so they themselves are building partnerships with other associations to consolidate, leverage resources, share staffing, and things of that nature, especially right now with the workforce crisis. The cost of talent is increasing, but also the difficulty in finding talent. I think one of the biggest things that we're seeing right now in the workforce change is the shift in the need from talent. So for example, the marketing director I needed 5 years ago is probably not the digital landscape expert that I need today. And so what does that mean in terms of my thinking around organizational need to fulfill strategic plan objectives, et cetera? Many of the associations that we work with are also considering or have formed consulting services as for-profit subsidiaries. They realize that there's a need in the industry to utilize the expertise they have on an individual level versus kind of aggregated for the industry. And they're starting to launch those services, and in some cases with amazing success and results. So part of the opportunity I think that the digital landscape presents is the change in education strategy and how you can look at that from a scalability standpoint. And that's really what's driving a lot of the change in thinking and the business model thinking within associations, is now that we're in this digital landscape. And all of these things kind of start to lend reason and rhyme and rationale for considering, organization, reorganization, or organization design, kind of all synonymous terms with each other. I'm going to define organization design in a little bit so we can have an understanding of what that even means, because it's a very broad-based term. But many of the reasons to do that is, if you're looking at, or if you've gone through a period of rapid growth and you need to be able to figure out how do we now absorb this growth and build a larger foundation for the next evolution of growth, that becomes a strategic rationale for organization design, as does leaving the strategic planning room. I mean, you may have heard of structure follows strategy. Well, when you're looking at structure, you're really looking at organization design. And if you come out with a new strategic plan and you're trying to use the same operational model to implement that, sometimes it works and sometimes it may need to evolve. In addition, as we had mentioned, technology advancing, that might mean you're adopting new systems with new capabilities, whether that's your learning management system, whether that's a customer relationship management system, whatever that may be. That may bring new capabilities and the need to look at new staffing and things of that nature, just from a capacity standpoint. Other organizations might be experiencing a lack of growth and might be shrinking in size, and they may need to cut costs. And one of the reasons to do org design is a workforce reduction. Hopefully, everybody is on the positive side of that note, and that members are looking to get back to in-person or hybrid relationships with you in some way, shape, or form. But as I mentioned, also mergers and affiliations are big trends. It's also a key part of looking at how you think through the way you're designed and structured. Is if that two organizations merge, you're forced into figuring out what is the structure, the operating model look like, who reports to who, what roles do we need, where's the redundancy, and where are there gaps. So all of those conversations come from having to transact a merger or an affiliation. Or you just want to test something new, right? As you go in and you're thinking about innovation and beta testing new services, new programs, whatever that may be, that may bring about a new business model, and that may require a different way of looking at how you are structured. And so these all stack up as reasons to look at organization design. And so when we say org design, this is what we mean. We use the STAR model by Jake Galbraith, which is an amazing tool. And obviously, any kind of design work always starts from the strategic lens as to, what do we need to grow? How do we need to compete? What do we need to look like in the future? And thinking 5 and 10 years out, even though those might be vague, abstract landscapes, help you to start to identify some of those macro trends, and then being able to absorb those internally from an organization design perspective. You start to question, what are the capabilities that we need to fulfill that? And do we have all of those in our organization, or do we need to bring on new people because there's new initiatives as part of our strategic plan? And anytime you're looking at bringing on new people or changing existing or thinking through how you might restructure the reporting, your kind of org chart plays a significant role in that. And that's, identifying how you should be configured to build a solid foundation. Process is key. I think, as you have processes for all of your types of service or the way you engage members, those might need to be explored, assessed, and then redefined based off new added capabilities. For example, if you're bringing on a tech solution, are you utilizing that to the fullest? How much of that can, support some of the other processes in your organization, or even automate some things to add capacity back to some of your staffing? And those systems are really a key role, because if you look at how you change behaviors, right, rather than think about changing an individual's behavior, you think about the systems that govern that individual, and changing those systems automatically change the behaviors. So if there's certain data that I want captured and recorded, and I can create customized fields within a system, then them following that process ensures that gets completed, or at least the process and accountability to that does. And as I mentioned, one of the big constant discussions, and we'll focus the majority of our example on our presentation today, is going to revolve around talent. Is how do I create role clarity for the folks that we have, and build accountability and performance? What does that look like? And that's the specific tool that we're going to go through with you in today's webinar. One of the things that we hear a ton of is the lack of role clarity in an organization. And it's no wonder, because a lot of times as you go through and you experience rapid growth over the years, you're just trying to kind of, put the pieces together and hire people. And there hasn't been a real time to step back from the organization and think through how things are logically connected, and who does what, and does that need to change in any way, shape, or form from a functional standpoint. So this exercise that we'll teach you today is all about building role clarity and performance. Part of building role clarity, if you think about it, is that trying to increase that clarity allows somebody to understand the game that they are playing as an employee. And if I understand the game and there's metrics to how to win at it, right, I would technically be a happier worker, because production is the basis of morale. So if I can improve production by clarifying the game, I should be able to increase staffing morale. And part of it also is getting people hyper-focused in the role that they're in. As you go through this kind of concept of change, you're going to start moving from maybe some folks are generalists in their position. And as you grow, you'll start moving away from generalists into specialists, and people will be more niche focused in a key area, which actually will make them more productive. But identifying what those things are, is part of the organization design process. And another thing that we hear of is my bench strength is not that strong for succession planning, or the depth of our talent is always a challenge. And I think this is because we're running on all cylinders, and we don't really understand how to groom people up in the organization, or our staff development process could be far more robust. One of the things that we recommend clients adopt is a concept that Elliot Jacques came up with, who wrote a book called Requisite Organization, where he differentiates between a job coach, which would be the direct supervisor, the direct manager, and a mentor. And those two things being very different from each other. A coach is there to coach your performance like a boss would, and a mentor is there to assess your feasibility and viability of moving up in the organization, or where it's best to utilize your talents over a period of time. And that's called the manager once removed relationship, where that boss's boss becomes a mentor within the organization to help cultivate talent, not only cultivate, but assess and verify the discussions around staffing with direct supervisors. So in addition to that, part of the reason a lot of people want to do org design is to increase capacity. And the way we've seen our clients look at this is that we need more bodies to do the work. And even though that might be part of some of the solutions, we've seen it as it's never the starting solution. In all our org design projects, we've been very successful in helping to identify added FTEs within the existing staffing structure by determining, that by clarifying that job role and responsibility a little differently. And as we do that, what happens is we start to realize where there's redundancy, where there's things that organizations can stop doing. And as we peel some of that away, we're left with added capacity. And then the question becomes is, how do we use that, or how do we fill that time? Because if there's not an answer for that, it gets filled up with low priority activity. Obviously, right now, the war for talent is very real, and the cost of that is very real as well. One of the things that's happening right now is that transformation in talent, meaning the types of organizations, the types of individuals that you may need to fill roles has dramatically changed with regards to a skill set. Perhaps there's a more degree of technological sophistication. If you think of your director of education, do they understand curriculum development? Do they understand, badging and micro-credentialing and certifications and how to do those things all within a hybrid landscape, so both digitally and in person. And that becomes very complicated really quickly. And so hopefully some of the things that we'll go through today will give you a little indication for how you think through and develop some of your talent based off bringing role clarity to them. And so the goals of what the exercise I'm going to lead you through is really around building functional clarity. So when you think of a job function, think of categories like finance or marketing or business development, education, general operations, technology. Those are all functional silos. And so part of when we look at org design is kind of understanding where things should align and stack up. One of the challenges that gets in the way of that is people saying, well, this person doesn't get along with this person, et cetera. So we're going to move them into a different area versus functionally where they belong. And so you start to think of, okay, how do we best align the organization so that it operates with the right expertise in the right wheelhouse? And that typically will lead to higher performance, as that's obviously one of the goals is your staff to be able to perform, or whether that's the department or whether that's just the organization as a whole, to be able to increase that performance. Part of the challenge there is understanding how do you measure that, and what do you measure? Because as you measure more things, that's what you're going to be holding folks accountable to in relationship to performance. And so part of this process that we'll walk you through in this activity, which we call the job post exercise, which I'll explain more in a little bit, helps to create ownership within the position, because you can do this in a very collaborative manner. When you're looking at restructuring or looking at building role clarity, you can engage staff in this activity, and that will help them build ownership into the change that might need to be made. And part of building that clarity will help increase accountability, because people have no place to hide, right? And so you may find that as you go through this exercise with some of your team, or you do any type of organizational design work, it does increase the level of accountability within the organization. And so the people that are busy versus productive tend to stand out, and they can be coached up as part of that process. And again, we're hoping that everything generates positive outcomes in terms of growth, their forward direction, et cetera, and improved team performance. So we created this concept called the job post, and it's a key part of our organizational design process. And we did it because as we were working with organizations, they would give us the employee job descriptions. And those job descriptions, had 65 bullet points on them. And, one of them said, I have to lift 35 pounds. And another one said, I have to smile all the time. And then everybody else's favorite bullet point, is do whatever else my boss says, right? And so they really became more of an HR tool and a risk management tool within HR versus a way to gamify management. And so we created the job post to simplify in a functional position, to create enough clarity, accountability, and priority that people became hyper focused in their work, or at least had a deeper understanding of the role they were there to play. Because like I said, as you're at an organization over time, the amount of tasks on your desk typically go up, not down. And what can happen is your original intent behind being hired gets diluted by other stuff, which is maybe not value add, or maybe can be delegated to somebody else, or can be stopped in its entirety. And so the job post really is a very, very simple tool. And it's 3 particular sections of that, which I'll kind of cover right after this concept here. And the idea behind doing an org design project is to create the time and space to work on the organization, right? So we're super busy running around all day, whether we're the CEO or the director, et cetera, and we're working and doing our job. And so part of doing these types of projects allows you to step back to work on the organization as a whole, or maybe you need to do something within the department on a particular team, or just for your role individually to kind of get clarity on what you need to do. We hear a lot from CEOs right now that they're super overwhelmed, and part of that is due to the workforce crisis. The other part is just because so much has been stacked up on their plate over time that they need to work on their role, and maybe they need to step back and list everything they do and figure out whether they're going to, what can they dump off their plate, what can they delegate to others, and what are the key things that they need to do. And this exercise, helps to go down that path and begin those conversations. So the job post, as I mentioned, is a very simple concept, and it's only 3 things. Number 1, the primary purpose of the function. So what's the primary purpose of this job position? Think of it as almost like writing a mission statement for the job. It's not a list of things you do. Right? The next is, what are the top 5 key activities that fulfill that purpose? And then lastly, how do I measure success? What are my key performance indicators that are going to allow me to judge movement in a positive or negative direction, right? And this makes up the job post. And this gets away from the concept of thinking through big, vague, lofty job descriptions and getting really specific for what the core of each position needs to be and what it needs to deliver. And so I want to jump into the actual process that we use, and I'll shoot you my email in the chat at the end of this presentation during our Q&A, and I could send you the the PDF slide deck for anybody that wants a copy, if you just email me. So the idea behind the job post exercise is to move from this vague, abstract landscape into a very specific level of role clarity that's built on the job post exercise. And that starts with step one, which is getting your team together. And sometimes what we'll do is we'll have a conference room. Everybody gets, a giant Post-it note and a little pad of sticky Post-it notes. And then we have them list everything they do, one thing per sticky note. Or you can use Excel. And as they go through this, they're thinking through all their activities and all their responsibilities. And it can be a pretty significant list. If you think about everything that's on your plate, I'm sure, you could easily come up with more than 44 things. But it's starting to list those things out. Because as I mentioned, over time, the stuff that's on your plate might change. So where you started 5 years ago might be dramatically different from any job description that's on file. And so this helps to tease that out, right? So as you list all your responsibilities and tasks, the next step is to identify the top 5 tasks that take the most amount of time. And this is to gain an understanding of capacity. Where are you spending your time? What are the things that are consuming your bandwidth the most? And that enables folks to really understand, out of this list of 44, 50 things that I have here, these 5 things really are consuming my world. And we're going to circle back to this because this is a key factor in part of this exercise that's going to show us a differentiation or a difference between the where time is being spent in one other point. So in step 3, we're gonna step away from that big laundry list of things that we do and design a primary purpose for the job function, right? So if you think about your staff, you're having them think through, what's your purpose? What's the purpose of this function? Okay, and this is where you get into thinking about functional alignment as well as scalability. Because if you have 2 people that write the same thing in their different functions, you have to reconcile really what that intent is. And usually the primary purpose is made up of 2 components. Who do you serve and what value do you create for them? So the challenge that we always run into is with managers when we think of, who do you serve? The answer they tend to want to give is I serve the member. And that may be the end goal or the end game of their management, but really they serve their direct their employees, and what value are they creating for them that allows them to serve that member. And so this starts to put things into context for leaders within an organization, but also helps to build functional alignment to ensure that a purpose is under the right job, under the right silo function: marketing, finance, IT, etc. And you're asking the team to write down a primary purpose for that statement. And then from there, we're going to jump back over to this list, and we're going to ask them to identify the top 5 tasks that are the highest priority in fulfilling that function. And this is where we tend to get a contrast between where people are spending their time and where the priorities are at. So this tells quite a bit of story around where capacity is being used, where potential, where people are potentially dealing with fires that come up on a repeated basis. And maybe you can identify root cause from this exercise and put that out permanently, or things that people are doing that are no longer relevant that you can stop doing, or just where misalignment is between time and priority. This is also where you'll see if people are wearing 2 hats, meaning 2 posts in an organization. If I'm doing 2 things, this list might be very confusing. I might be spending all of my time doing one thing when my priorities show I should be doing another, and that might be where somebody has 2 hats on, two separate functions. And ideally what you want to do there is you want to break that into 2 separate job post exercises. And the reason being is, as you grow, one of those is going to have to get backfilled with another person, because you've grown beyond the point where any one individual can do those 2 roles because they've become too big. And that helps you start to think about how do you separate those things out. After you do that, typically what you're doing is you're going through those top 5 priorities and then, wordsmithing them and listing them here separately. And that leads into step 6, which is to identify the top 3 success measures that define the performance of a job function. And so the important part here to remember is that as you're defining performance metrics, you want to make sure that the individual or that function that you're assigning these to is in control of being able to move that needle up or down, right? If you're measuring someone on something that they can't control or don't have influence on how to move, then that's really unfair to them. And so this is probably the hardest part of the job post exercise, and where kind of constant monitoring over the years and adjusting and fine tuning, becomes a necessity. Is because this is where you can create incentives as well as measure people's effectiveness within a particular job, a job post or job position. So at the end of the day, a job post is really simple. It's the function, the person that's in it, primary purpose, top 5 key activities, and top 3 success measures. So to kind of give an example of that, this would be an example of a marketing manager position where their primary purpose is members and potential members throughout the country interested in our association. And if you think of kind of the flow and the pattern of things, is that if I'm the director of marketing or the marketing manager, I can't force people to join. I can generate enough interest in the organization that people walk across the threshold to talk to one of our membership enrollment specialists. And then that specialist moves them into the operations, and then they're retained within operations. And so, that primary purpose becomes really key to factor in as an example on how to use. And then obviously the top 5 key activities, and this may differ based off of how you do marketing and what you do and what's most important or most effective. And so a lot of data might go into thinking through these key activities after the post exercise, to build a final product. And then your units of measure. So potential new members in the door, conversion ratio, if that person is passing that off to membership or keeping it themselves, and then event attendance. And so those might be some basic examples of how you would measure or how you would set up a job post for a marketing manager. Now, what I want to be able to do is have intentional conversations with them about how they move the needle on those success measures, right? So if trending data went up and that was a positive impact, I'd want to know, what did we do that moved that needle, and how do we do more of that? Similarly, if something drops in terms of performance, what we can do an after action review, what happened, how do we do less of that? So the exercise becomes around helping the manager also figure out how to have conversations with their direct team members so that they can coach them to performance. So it doesn't become, if I'm meeting with my team, it doesn't become a conversation for the sake of having a conversation. It becomes something very intentional that's data driven. And so this is a phenomenal tool. It's been kind of one of the core part of our organization design exercise that we do with clients. And the benefits to that are you get a higher level of performance from your staff, and most of this leads to an awareness of how to increase that, whether it's with existing staff or whether that's new staff. It also creates enough clarity to hold people accountable to performance, so there's no more, you lessen the gray area, and it makes it easier for managers to understand how to work with their team. Part of the exercise relating to time versus priority helps to build more efficient workflow, to identify what are the things getting in the way, where's time being consumed that it should not be, and you could start to address those. For example, if you had a team of 10 in the room and they were doing this post exercise and they all had very similar things that were consuming their time that were totally unrelated to their job function, you could have the conversation around whether those that thing was necessary in their function, or whether it needed to reside in any. Also, that same exercise will show, where you have duplication of effort or redundancy within the organization, and that will help you kind of tease those things apart to really understand where they should belong. Now, this is a challenge because if I have two people and they're doing similar things, but they're in different functional areas, I may want to take that off one person's plate and give it to the other to focus on solely. Now, if I do that, anything I take away from somebody is a perceived loss, right? And so part of understanding that, if I take something away, I have to ensure that I'm filling that time with high value activities versus letting it fill up with low value activities. So let's say I free up 20% of somebody's work week because I'm moving something off their plate. What would I like them to fill that with that's high priority? So one, they don't perceive the loss because we're getting people hyper focused, and two, in that they don't fill it with things that we wouldn't want them to be doing in the first place. And that's really the difference of ensuring that people are productive versus busy. It will also flush out who is productive versus busy, and then that can be clarified as part of the job post exercise. So in all cases, it's been a very positive cultural impact after doing these types of projects where organizations have a tremendous level of understanding as to who does what, and their interaction with each other as a team improves and increases in terms of performance. So there are quite a bit of positive cultural impacts that come out of this. And so, like I say, production is the basis of morale. And if I know how to increase production, I can, as a result, increase morale. And that's typically through the job post exercise, which is one component of our org design process. And that helps to build clarity, accountability, and performance. And so I did want to make sure that we had plenty of time for Q&A. And I am putting my email in the chat, and it's also on the screen. So if you would like a copy of the presentation, I'm happy to PDF that over to you. And you can use that job post exercise for building a little bit of clarity with your team. But I welcome any questions that you guys have at this point.
We did get a question
Sure.
from Rachel, or maybe it's pronounced Rochelle, who came up with the STAR model. You mentioned at the very beginning of your presentation.
Sure. Jay Galbraith was the author of an organization design book, and he came up with the STAR model, which is the basis for our organization design work. Great question.
Okay. And then to our audience, don't forget, please post your questions in the Q&A or the chat box, whichever box you prefer. It doesn't really matter to me. We'll see both of them. The next question is from Trip. This is fantastic material. I'd love to get some articles, or this is more so a comment, but I'd love to get some articles or book recommendations that go into this level of detail. So I will suggest to Trip that you email eric@curtisstrategy.com for that.
Yeah, I can send you 2 or 3 incredible org design books that have kind of become part of the foundation of our work, as well as our philosophy that can help you out. So shoot me an email and I'll throw those recommendations right back to you. And also, if you have any questions on any kind of case examples of things that you're working on or challenges that you're facing with regards to org design, I'm happy to answer those kind of on the fly here as well. Just for everybody's learning benefit.
We got a question from Rex. What about consultants or outsourcing to gain expertise or reduced workload? Any thoughts on that, Eric?
Sure. As far as doing an org, well, I'll look at that. I'll interpret that from 2 ways. One, doing an org design project, which obviously having a consultant and an objective view is a tremendous benefit. Obviously we wouldn't have a business if that was not the case. But I'll look at it from another view, is if you need added capacity within your organization and farming some of that detail out to consultants, is also a smart move. One, because it's a contract position, so you're not incurring the benefit costs and things of that nature. And you can test out whether you need certain levels of expertise based off your engagement with those consultants, and then make more informed hiring decisions as well after having hired a consultant to do a specific task.
All right. Got a question from Kendra. I run a very small staff organization. Wearing multiple hats is inevitable. Do you recommend sectioning out the job into key areas and doing the job post assignment for each area?
Yeah. So when you look at going into the strategic planning process, and that gets done, and you've got your plan, part of the necessity of an organization is to build a bigger foundation, right? So that you can support growth, whether that's coming or not. So you're acting intentionally and say, I want to bring higher levels of order and organization, right? And in doing so, that will result in me growing. So if I start to think about my 2 or 3 staff that I may have and all the hats that they're wearing, I want to break those apart and put them on an org chart, right? So I'll have me as the CEO. Maybe I've got marketing and membership, and those are the same people. And maybe I've got education and finance, and those are the same people, et cetera. I want to break all of those out as separate functions on an org chart, even though I will have 2 positions or 3 positions with the same name on them. Because what that starts to do is tells you a story as to where you're experiencing the most capacity pains. And as you do increase your levels of order and organization, ideally there's some revenue growth, and there might be some added resources there to finance a position. And knowing what position to backfill first is going to be most important. And that can be driven by 2 factors. One, your strategic plan says we need to go down this road, and this road we're slowly getting there. But if we had a dedicated staff, we'd get there a lot quicker, right? So that would be one lens to look at it. The other is that you're trying to grow as an organization, and you as a manager are dipping down and doing other people's jobs for them, right? Because either they don't have the skill set, the bandwidth, or it's too much capacity to be able to require. And so the more your time is consumed in a position, that's a red flag as well, because you need to be able to step back to focus on growth, management of your board, looking at talent acquisition, strategic partnerships externally, et cetera. So that list goes on for you. And the more you're focused in the organization because of staffing challenges, the less time you have externally to pull the organization forward.
That was a great question. Thanks, Kendra. We got another question from Crystal in terms of redundancy. Given the current turbulence in the world, she's not kidding, pandemic, war risk, cyber threats, power outages, storms, how do you balance risk management with making sure staff have specific job roles / structures? Great question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'll throw cybersecurity in on that one. I think when you build clarity for folks, they understand how to perform. It also helps to tease out where some risk factors might be, whether or not there's a level of understanding of continuity planning, and whether or not there's a level of understanding of the different types of risks. I mean, you as the leader might know what those are, but do they really understand what those are? And do they understand how to react to them? So like, for example, if they click on that link that was in that phishing email and get ransomwared, do you guys have a process for that? I know that's a hot topic these days. Are you in the cloud? So if a tornado hits your office building with nobody in it and takes all your computers away, is that just a matter of buying new equipment? What are those things? I think risk is going to be in everything that we do these days, and I think within org design, it's the risks that we see are staffing retention risks or toxic staff risk. So kind of the rule of thumb is that, if you've got a great employee that is performing really well, but doesn't get along with everybody, they're still a great employee performing really well. However, if you have somebody that's toxic to your culture, right, that's eroding other people, that's sending others to go search for new jobs because they don't want to work with you anymore, that becomes more of a critical issue. So when you look at the staffing risks under org design, it's really about retention and acquisition. And do you have a culture and level of newness that's going to create an appeal or be able to encourage the performers versus the busy folk? Yeah, a lot of weather these days as well coming across the country as a risk factor.
Unpredictable weather.
I know.
I did post a message in the chat box to everyone about certificates and an evaluation email. Certificates will land in your inboxes within about 10 minutes of the program closing, in addition to another email from our system about filling out an evaluation. The evaluations are pivotal to ensuring future programming. So we really appreciate if you do provide feedback on today's program. I'm going to share that feedback with Eric today in a few days once we get that evaluation information. So don't hesitate to complete that evaluation when you do receive it. We'll go ahead and make another call for questions. Looks like we got a comment from Julia.
Yep.
Due to the pandemic, we have gone from working in an office team of 8 to working from home indefinitely. Join the club. How has organizational design been affected by remote work? It's hard to keep people motivated and engaged while communicating primarily via Slack and email.
Yep. No. So I think that a lot of the org design projects we're seeing today are as a result of remote work, and folks are able to save quite a bit of money on their physical plant expenditures, not needing an office, but they're also able to tackle a new remote workforce. So that does become an important factor from a leadership perspective as to how do you engage staff and what type of hybrid model can you adopt. So for example, even though you might be engaging them in a virtual environment, when will you meet in person? What does that look like from an event standpoint or from a staff meeting standpoint? Because building relationships amongst the team is best done face to face. Doing co-planning is best done face to face, and some things virtual is great for, and others it's not so much. I will tell you one of the benefits that we've seen from working virtually is there's really no place to hide with regards to performance, right? It's not like things don't get lost in the office. It's very targeted now that an individual working from home, it's almost like there's a bigger spotlight on their performance because of that. And so, when you start to have those conversations with them about those key metrics and what are they doing to move the numbers, you're getting a more in-depth level of clarity as a leader to assess that capability and ability, not only ability to work remote, but just general ability for the function that they're in.
We did get a comment from Anne about the job post exercise. She sends her thanks in regards to that exercise.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been a great tool for us to use. In fact, the concept came, from having been in the Marine Corps, where you're assigned a post, and your assignment for that post is really simple. And so I think that's one of the things that we're lacking these days is simplicity and clarity. And part of the job descriptions, even though they're an HR risk management tool, back to risk, is they include everything. And sometimes that everything is very vague language. And getting really specific helps to gamify management so that what people are accountable to, and more importantly, they know. And that improves the relationship as well between managers and their direct staff.
We get a question from Anne. She asked about a recording. She missed the first 30 minutes due to a call, but I just wanted to inform the rest of the audience that this presentation is being recorded, and a recording will be sent to only registrants after the fact. So be looking out for that in your inboxes as well. You might get a flurry of emails from me, but don't delete them all. There's some important information in them. Okay, we'll go ahead and make another call for questions. Still got a few minutes left, so don't hesitate. Alternatively, if you have no interest in typing because you're tired of typing, you can just click that raised hand button and I will unmute your computer microphone and you can speak directly to us. Okay, I think that might have been our last question.
It's a great one.
So Eric, if you want to make your closing statements, and I'll close out the webinar after the fact.
Sure. I appreciate everybody taking some time out of their extremely busy days to not only improve their own learning and understanding, but just to be here with me today and let me share some of the work that we do. I greatly appreciate that. If there's any anything you need in terms of follow-up questions, as some people prefer to ask questions offline, please feel free to email me at Eric@Curtis.Strategy. Happy to take those questions and Q&A offline. But thank you again. I appreciate it. And thank you, Joseph, for the opportunity today.
Of course. Thanks for the presentation, Eric, and to our audience members, thanks for participating today and taking some time out of your day. Again, email Eric@Curtis.Strategy.com for any follow-up questions. Everybody, have a great day. Bye-bye.